Hello, and welcome to another installment of the Jhael Hakimian Podcast. For those of you who may not know, I come from a Panamanian-American family. I'm very proud of that. We are very proud of that. It doesn't always factor in, and most people don't figure that out. Most people think we're either American or maybe Jamaican or Caribbean. Most people do not think that we're Latin American from a Central American country unless they really do understand Latin American culture. But I will say that I notice it more and more that my cultural roots, my family roots, play a big part in how I live my life, the way and the perspective that I take, and the lens that I look at things through. And recently on our family thread, one of our family members posted a video in regards to this upcoming election and the two candidates. And I thought the video was hilarious. I thought she's very funny. I thought she was well informed. And it started a quick conversation, a really polite conversation. And then Tia Melissa suggested that we continue it. And Ray was on board for it. And a couple of others have joined in. So I've got a couple of my Panamanian-American and African-American by marriage family members on to have a quick discussion about where we stand on policy, what we're thinking, and just to model what it looks like to come from the same background and have our background, our life experiences that inform us, and we have different nuanced ways we look at it, and we can agree and disagree agreeably. And so with that, I'm going to have Jack play a quick little short clip, and then I'm going to introduce some of my family to you all. Jack, play that clip for us real quick.
Any other that got to say about Kamala Harris running for president? I already put this on Twitter, but dear Jermaine Dupree and any other that got to say about Kamala Harris running for president. I already put this on Twitter, but sometimes tone is misinterpreted with the written word, so I thought I'd say it. Now, Jermaine Dupree posted this rambling nonsense on social media yesterday, and I'm not really sure what this man who cheated on Janet Jackson is asking, but I think the answer is you don't understand how the system works, Jermaine. There are a lot of things people think presidents can do without congressional approval, but people are wrong. Congress has a lot of power. Now, Jermaine, I know you are a successful businessman and CEO, but our government is not a business. It runs on a constitution. And to make laws or spend federal money in this country, you have to follow a set of rules that are enforced by Robert's rules. And people who belong to D9 organizations, or basically any organization that has constitution and bylaws, they are very familiar with Robert's rules. But people who own record labels and ice cream companies are not. Additionally, our government is basically run on the honor system. Everybody is supposed to respect and follow and enforce the rules. Republicans do not do this. They exploit the rules so that they can cheat and get rule changes in their favor. They create problems to look like they are the only ones that can solve problems. And if the GOP gets power back this November, they are going to change the rules of how our government works so that they can remain in power permanently.
All right, that's just a little snippet of what she said. Later on, she goes on to make some really good historical references to certain acts that gave women more power and to things like that. With that, I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. Let's start with Sandra, and then we'll move on to Xiomara, and we'll go from there. And just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your worldview and the principles and values you bring into how you look at policy and politics. Sandra? Looks like you're on mute. We just got to get you off mute real quick. While she's getting off mute, let's go ahead and have Ray introduce himself.
All right, I'm Ray Luna. I'm the eldest of the cousins, of Jhael's cousins, and I live out in Los Angeles. I guess my basic, just keep it short, my basic worldview is peace, unity, but I also believe philosophically, like You can't get real peace. You can't get real unity without real justice. So uh, that in turn needs collective accounting of everybody's reality, what everybody's going through, what everybody's dealing with, whether that's a collective group or an individual. So yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What about you, Melissa?
My name is Melissa Brown, and I am Jhael's aunt. I am the one that stands between the former generation and the generation coming up behind, which is Ray's and Jhael's generation. And my worldview that impacts everything I do, not just policy, but everything I do, is God-centered. It's all about Jesus. It's all about what he calls us to do and how he calls us to live. So the choices I make is based upon what will bring him the greatest glory and the greatest good to all mankind.
Beautiful.
And my cultural background is Panamanian, just like Jhael's.
And I don't know if Sandra was able to come off mute, if we're able to hear. There she is. Are you able to come off mute, Sandra? We can see you perfectly, but it looks like you're still on mute. There you are. Uh-oh, you went back on mute. Excellent.
There you go.
We can hear you now.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We can hear you perfectly. Could you tell everyone a little bit about the values and principles that inform the way you look at policy and elections? Are you able to hear us? It looks like we can hear you. Can you hear us? She might be having a hard time hearing us. Let's see if we can't get someone to give her some technical help, but let's mute her for now, and then Jack, are we able to mute her so then we go to Jonathan?
Okay, am I on?
You are.
Great. My name is Jonathan Brown, and I am very happily the husband of Melissa Brown, who just spoke a second ago. We are, by way of background, we had a ministry called Lifeways for Living, where we help and counsel marriages and parenting. I'm a part of the National Council for Rites of Passage, where our goal is that we would help fathers pass down a heritage of faith to their children during that vital stage, 13 to 16. And everything we do, especially politics, is influenced by who God is as revealed through his word. And we take no stance that is contrary to the word of God. And where there is no discrepancy, then the question is simply, would this be pleasing to God? Would God be pleased? And so that's kind of how our politics are informed. And I think that's it, Jhael.
Beautiful. And as soon as we can get Sandra on, we'll hear from her. But in the meantime, my next question would be, and this just starts the conversation. How does your cultural ethnic background, what's the nuance that plays in the way you look at policy, at politics, and how you vote. For example, I will tell you that my for me, foundational is my biblical worldview. That is the foundational thing that informs. But I oftentimes find
Good
myself
afternoon.
talking. Ah, there you are, Sandra. Can you hear us? We can hear you. Can you hear us? Hi.
Can't hear them.
You can't hear us? Oh, this is unfortunate. Maybe we can send her a message to just give her time to come on and say whatever she wants to say about her worldview. Jack, can we send her a message on that? And when she's ready, tell her to start talking, and the rest of us will go mute. But in the meantime, for me, I have a biblical worldview, but then oftentimes I'm also have been living life working in urban missions. I'm raising 4 young Black men in America, and so oftentimes I will find people that I worship with, people that I agree with on almost all things theologically, and then there's a nuanced difference in the way I look at policy or politics, and I realize that it comes from the experiences that are unique to me because of my cultural lens, because of navigating this world as a Black woman first, and then as a Black Hispanic woman as well, and as a woman. All those things also play into my understanding of truth, of justice, of equity, of what is right and what is optimal. And it sometimes finds myself not completely aligned with people that I would be aligned with everything else with. And it's because of that cultural part, that family part. So I'm wondering if any of you could speak to that. Have you found that as well as you've gone through people that would expect you to be 100% aligned with them on an issue? There's a perspective, nuanced perspective you have that maybe gives you pause, or maybe surprises them where you land on that. Anyone want to speak to that? My favorite part of the podcast when everyone's too polite to come off mute first.
I would love to hear, Jhael, what that nuanced difference is for you personally, because I'm not sure. I honestly don't know if you and I would be different on certain things. You and I biblically are aligned, but I know that there are some things we see differently, but I'm not sure what they are. I would love to hear what your nuanced differences are to most of the people that you would typically align with in most things.
Absolutely. I can talk about the last 2-3 elections, for example, that I do believe that the person who's a leader should be judged more strictly, more harshly. So that for me, how that translates is there's a standard to uphold about the way that you act and the way that you present yourself. Absolutely 100%. And I think I've said a couple of times, if we were living in what I would consider or thought would be normal times, there would be certain people that would be automatically disqualified in my book simply because of the way they purport themselves, the way that they conduct themselves, the way that they come across. But because there's a higher issue for me, I can't automatically disqualify a person because of that. On the other side of things, a couple of years ago, there was a candidate that we were looking at down here, and someone said, well, this candidate has this stance on this particular issue, and that is unbiblical. And I was like, agreed, 100%. But here are some other issues that our Creator cares about just as much. And because the issue that this candidate has a stance on that's unaligned is not an issue that I believe is pivotal in this election, but here are some other issues that are just as explicitly talked about in the Word of God, even though it may not be as close to your heart and your home. But for the Lord, He's very clear about how we treat the widow, the orphan, the least of these, the ones that can't defend themselves. And so if that is what God says, and that is how God cares, And he also cares about this over here, but I don't think that's going to be a major issue. There won't be a big shift in society concerning this issue. There won't be that policy is not going to come up. But these other things are immediate things that we're talking about. That's going to actually be another factor in determining who I do or do not vote for. Does that make sense?
Well, Jhael, I hear what you're saying. And this is Janathan. I hope you can hear me. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. But to me, those sound like issues that are based in your faith or ethical. It's not necessarily cultural nuances. And so that's the reason I was hesitant and slow to speak beforehand, because there are some times where there's cultural nuances that make you move in a way different than you would move other than your faith-based nuances. For me, I know that I had a lot of cultural nuances coming through a period of time when, Jhael, you may have been there, but you may not remember. But coming through the civil rights movement and looking for the rights of Black people, in specific, the rights of minorities in general, there were imbalances that affected me or affected a people culturally that influenced my decision making. So the policies that were put in place were designed to balance out the imbalances.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't believe that people recognized that the imbalances were due to cultural effects of segregation, looking upon a people as not a people, and as not equal. And so there were a lot of things that were there that I supported that later came under contradiction or under attack, because people began to say, well, hey, you're doing this for Black men. What about white men? And this was things like equal opportunity programs, where you were giving Blacks an opportunity to get into school, where there were white men more qualified. I take that back, much more qualified for those positions, but those spots were held for Blacks in order to try and bring a balance back. And culturally, I was very much in favor of that, because I, from my experience, was very familiar with the fact that it wasn't the issue of whether I was capable or a Black person was capable. It was the issue of whether we had the opportunity. So we could be the best in our school, but our school didn't offer the classes you took. We didn't have the level of teachers you had. So you're going to put us to compete against you for a spot when we didn't have the tools that you have. If we'd have had them, we would have taken advantage of them, but they weren't offered in our schools, as schools were separate. Black schools were funded differently. The funding was designed so that Black schools didn't receive the funding that white schools received. I mean, it was just a very purposeful effect, a very purposeful impact. And I see that. And so I was influenced in my voting by the cultural fact that I felt like there were some inequities that had taken place that needed to be rebalanced. And those weren't faith driven so much as they were
experiential.
Yes, they were part of my culture. I had seen these things had taken place, and I was like, well, I'm all for, let's find some balance in the midst of these things, culturally speaking. And so I think those things are culturally influenced for me personally.
Yeah. So what I found with me was similar, but on the flip side, in that most of my counterparts had grown up with a certain amount of unacknowledged, unrecognized privilege that gave them the liberty to be able to focus just on this one issue as the issue that God cared about. because they weren't affected, which is what you're saying, by the other issues. And because of the nature of my upbringing and my work, not only was I affected by other issues, such as what you're talking about, but I recognized them in the people that God had me ministering to. Whereas with my counterparts, their experiences didn't give them that point of reference. And so the priority was always this one issue. I guess that's what I meant as far as culture. Coming up in a more diverse culture than what most of my counterparts that I worship with on Sundays, the cultures that they were brought up in. But really, really good point. Anyone want to add to that?
I wanted to jump in on what Jonathan was saying about, his experience, his cultural experience in terms of his relation to civil rights. And it's interesting that I heard him say he kind of separated that from faith-based. And from my perspective, I see them as all tied together. It's like anything that I, through my cultural experience and thus through my cultural lens, that I might see and I might give attention to, that the next person from whatever, from a Jewish background or a Native American or a white European background, they may not see, right? It still is, I guess the impulse is still about addressing something that is wrong, right? So to me, it's still faith-based connected. It's still about, because that's what, from a biblical and Christian background, it's about us striving to do every aspect of our individual, but also our collective in society. How do we get us closer to living each thing right? So as it pertains to the Black experience and civil rights, I think that's, and I hope that was the impetus for most people. It was that God-given design to them to be able to recognize and say, this is wrong. This is wrong. We have to actually take action to do something to bring balance to this wrong, to right this injustice and make it just, and that's why I started out by saying, like, my worldview is, before we get into the details of it, is the basis of it is like that idea of, like, we have to bring justice to not just ourselves and within our family units, but to the world in whole, because that is what is going to yield, peace and joy and happiness and harmony and all the different things that we say we like as human beings. But sometimes we, again, we'll be able to identify it from our cultural experience, but not necessarily put on our, empathetic hat and see and put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and say, oh yeah, you know what, that should be just as important to me, even though it's not impacting me. I can see the injustice in that scenario, and I should be for that. You know what I mean? And that is actually an active part of my extension of my faith in action, right? Out of my mind and into actual, movement.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Which is like the idea of how we treat the other in the corner. All right, it looks like we've got Xiomara in here. I told her she's having technical difficulties, but we definitely wanted to get her perspective. So she's ready to talk, and we are ready to listen. Over to you, Xiomara.
Well, you have to realize that our faith is what kept us going in the past when we didn't have certain rights, right? I think we get caught up into all the noise around us, and that's what they want. So we lose focus on what's important, because you have to think about what's going on in this election. They want you to lose focus because, like the young lady said, it's going to affect generations of all the fight that we did, that our ancestors did, for us to even have the opportunity to be at the table. So if we sit back and say, oh, it's because of what they believe, or what is going to be profitable for your children? Because forget about us right now. We want a legacy for our children. Everything that we do in the thinking about how it's going to affect them. when they become parents.
Yeah.
You know, generationally, how are they going to be affected by the rights that they have to be all that they could be? You understand?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think they want us to get caught up into all the noise. But are these people that's going to be in government? Sure, they're not perfect. Kamala is not perfect. But is she going to have our best interest? We already know what Trump is thinking. He doesn't have our best interest. He doesn't have our children's best interest. And some people say, well, I'm not going to vote. But, you know, I work with people that are homeless, right? We do transitional homes. He wants to cut all of that. And that's the thing. We see something wrong, we try to help the defenseless, basically, the people that don't have a voice. We know that it's the right thing to do. Sometimes people don't want to do certain things, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's where we get caught up into all this nonsense that's going on. Who's going to do the right thing? Whether you think that they're going to be this perfect person, that's not logical, because all of us are a work in progress. And we innately, I stay hopeful because of my faith, because of what our parents taught us. I remember, mommy being like, if that's your friend, I'm going to bring them in as my child. That's how that's how our parents looked at things. They didn't have to be related, but that's your friend. Come on in. I'm going to treat you as my own.
Yeah.
So that's how you have to think of this political thing. Do you want your children to be okay with one? Or do you want them to still be struggling and trying to get a place at the table? And I think what they're afraid of right now is that more of us have a voice. More of us are at the table. And if we're not at the table, we create our own table. So do you want those rights to be taken away? Because it can be. That's how crucial this is. So with that, I like Ray said, we want not the device, the division part of it. Let's live in harmony and try to teach our children that it's not okay. You have to own up to your behavior. And with some of these people that are in office, they're not being held accountable. And it's like, is that what we're doing now? It just blows my mind every day that I hear what's going on in the politics, and you can't even have a good. It's okay to agree to disagree, and that's the thing. We've lost that because of all that noise that's going on right now, and that's unfortunate because it's okay to think in a different way, but the way you think, I might come around to how you think because it makes more sense, so
There's a saying that
I
says
just hope that we do good by our children,
yeah,
and they don't have to fight for their rights again.
yeah. There's a great saying that says no one's ever been insulted into changing their mind.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good. So I would ask this. Very good to hear from you, and My question is, do you define harmony? And Ray, you can chime in on this too, by what you just said, agreeing to disagree.
Uh,
To a degree.
to a degree, but not
To a
necessarily.
degree, and why I say that is because I don't have to not like you because you think different of what I think. That's not okay.
Right.
It's okay for you. You have your reasons why you stand by how you think. But I still have to respect you for thinking that way. That doesn't mean I have to hate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Sandra. Does not mean that we have to agree.
I'm
Uh,
Xiomara.
oh, sorry. Did I say Sandra? See, I'll be mixing y'all up. I just wanted to jump back on something
I
that
totally
Xiomara.
missed what she said. Broke
Oh,
up.
oh,
Ray, you wanted to say it in your own words?
yeah. She was saying that, it's important that we learn how to agree to disagree, right? Respectfully, and I wholeheartedly believe in that. Um, I I heard you talking, Siamata, and there was a couple of things that like I was like, oh, okay. So for me, where I'm at, like I'm so about that like me personally, I don't subscribe to any political party, right? I don't subscribe to any party. And just again, to get to it quickly, through my experience, my perspective on the political spectrum is that there's good and bad happening under every umbrella you could think of, right? So for me, when you were talking about, what we passing down to our kids, that's one thing too, is to realize that there are mechanisms and people out there with agendas that are operating in such insidious ways. And we are being, what's the word? We're being cultivated to look at things in these pre-programmed ways, these kind of us and them ways, which feeds into what you were saying, Siamata,
Like
about
master illusionist.
making us want to fight with each other, fight with him. So if the days that we're living in now, if you pay attention, everything, even things that we agree upon, they're being reframed to be discussed in a manner that yields conflict, that yields division, that yields,
Yeah.
So
But
we
that is
all,
created that way.
it is created that way. So we all, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, no matter who you think you're going to support, this and that, we have to understand there's a bigger agenda than just who sits in that seat that is happening. And we have to be careful and guard that we are not becoming in subtle and, like I said, insidious ways, participants of that. So that's why one thing I hold hard is I don't care about it. I don't hold no allegiance to any party. My allegiance is to my moral compass that was given to me by God, that I've developed over my experience, that I've developed through my lineage, my aunts, my uncles, through the Bible, through my understanding of God and the best I understand it now, how God wants us to live. That's what I'm striving for. That's my compass, not how a person talks, what color suit they're wearing, what's the banner under their name, even the religious banner. We can even take that. Like some people say one thing and it's another thing. So we have to ourselves as the adults be on guard, but we also have to teach our children that that's the world you're walking into, that people are going to sell you on things, and you can very easily be swayed to a point where you're saying things about a candidate that if you actually do your due diligence, you may find out is untrue. And that's part of the whirlwind that is being created, that we're getting sucked up. So we must, I feel strongly that we must guard against that. And because when we guard against that, what it does is it allows us to focus on what needs to be focused on and really be
but that's why we
into the things that are actually important, as opposed to the circus that's trying to be created.
That's why we have to do our diligence in doing our homework, because it's so crucial of your decision. Now, people have died for you to be able to have this conversation.
Yes. May I jump in and say something
Yes.
quickly?
Tia, one before you jump in. Sorry, I'm so sorry to dominate.
No,
But
go
just
ahead.
to add,
No, go
just to add to that, Amada, also I'm gonna use a specific example that you used when you said
Okay.
Trump, Harris. So even that in itself, when we start getting framed in this kind of like this two choices, that's not the reality. That's not the reality. There's multiple choices. So even something as little as that, we have to be on guard that we are not being, again, there's not a narrative being crafted to us, and we're not becoming hypnotized by it, so that that's how we orientate ourselves. That's how we look at the world. And I'm saying this as a critique of myself, because I even at a point in my life not that long ago, found myself, when I talked to my wife, found myself operating that way. Like, no, there's more choices, right? There's more choices and more people out there that I can do it. So even right now, if you ask me who I'm voting for, there's other part beside those two. There's other people with things that I am considering. And so even in terms of how we look at that, we look at the federal situation as like, that's the most important. No. There's state and there's city, and there's things that we can address. Like you brought up the homeless thing. There's ways we can address that on a city and state level. So, but what I'm saying is we are being given the narrative, and we are being, we don't get it explicitly, but somehow we've come to a political culture where we focus more on the federal than more what's going on in our city, than more is going on in our county or in our state.
We don't understand
I'm gonna go to you, Tia.
how the smaller things impact the greater things.
Yes.
And so we get caught up in the greater thing, supposedly, not knowing that every decision we make on the community level, on the state level, all these things make a difference. But I want to talk about what Ray and Shamada were talking about. You know, Ray talked about his moral compass, and that's what drives his dedication to God and what he does and all these things. And Shamada was saying, yes, but I think there's somewhere else to start before. For me, my relationship with God drives my compass. Okay. My choices, my compass is directed by who God is. And God then directs me to understand I need to know what I believe about these issues before I can jump into the arena. Because if I jump into the arena, which is crazy, I'm going to get lost.
Yeah.
I'm going to get caught up. And so I have to know the foundation upon which I'm standing in this arena, and know what I believe and why I'm going to vote or choose or stand the way I stand. We get caught up with everybody else's, like Ray says, there are two parties and this one or this one. Hello, I've told my family for a long time, what if there is someone running that is more in line with what we believe, what we stand for, right? What if there's someone else? But you know what? The answer I get back is they're not going to get the votes, so we can't vote for them. What? That's why they won't get the vote.
Absolutely.
Because you won't pick up that banner and vote for that person and help others to see the need to vote for the other person. But I'm saying my anthem call to my family, wherever you stand, know what you believe. Know what your stance is, and your belief, whatever it is, how does that speak into every aspect of your voting? Why are you voting for what you're voting for? If you don't comprehend that, if you don't hold on to the truths that you stand for and believe in, they're going to get lost in the rhetoric of the conversation. It's just going to be stuff that everybody's talking about.
I have to go into work, but I'm going to try to get back in as soon as I get settled.
We hope you get back in. Thank you. Well, what I wanted to ask each of you is we've been talking in a lot of generalities right now. I want to get us a little bit more specific, and so I wanted to ask, like, what are your particular views on some of the things that are highlighted in this particular election cycle. Immigration is highlighted, economic policy, religious rights is highlighted, infant and mother rights, preborn rights, social justice. And so, what are your views on, for example, economic policy, and how does that inform the candidates that you look at and the policies that you support?
Sure. Let me go ahead and respond to this. Thank you guys. This is really great. And I think, to answer your specific question about policy, this is where the rubber meets the road. And this is where you realize why in reality, when you look at Black people, right, whether it's Blacks in the diaspora, I was born in West Africa, Liberia. You got Blacks from Panama, Costa Rica, Cuba, Brazil.
I can't hear.
You can't hear me? Testing. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So, you got Blacks from everywhere, right? Because a lot of times when we think about
you're breaking up so much that I'm losing most of the conversation.
You might need to move to a different spot. I had that problem also earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tia, because I can hear him clearly.
I can.
So, so basically, even when we talk about, you may need to mute, Melissa. I think we can hear you speaking. So basically, when we talk about Democrat, Republican, we tend to think American, right? And it's more of an African American, and unless you're like a Black who came to America and joined the African American narrative. I see this here in Miami with Haitians and Jamaicans, right? We're entering into a story, but when you really look at the issues, the policy issues that Blacks care about, right? And a lot of it also differs on economic status. I mean, if you're a Black person making over 5 million, you start becoming Republican to some degree. If you're someone working amongst the poor, you're seeing poverty, and no matter how much corporate private money you get, you need the big hand of federal government. You need tons of subsidies and grants to deal with some of those problems because it's just bigger than the county and the state. So I think a lot of times when you're dealing with where Blacks stand, whether you're Panamanian-American, Nigerian-American, Puerto Rican American, whatever your Blackness is identified with, and ultimately you are becoming American, I think it ultimately becomes a policy issue. And my position is that we actually need to become more like the Jewish lobby. They're very small number of people, but if you look at it, there's let's say there's top 10 policy issues that Jews have. They're all united around Israel. I don't care if you're talking about a liberal, a totally progressive Jew, or you're talking about a conservative Jew that's deep in the right wing party of the Republican Party. And so when you talk about what are the top 10 things that Blacks, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, care about, right? We care about racial equality. We care about voting rights. We care about economic justice, job creation. We care about affordable health care. We care about education, whether it's done through charter schools, home schools, public schools. We care about criminal justice reform. We care about affordable living. We care about gun control, violence. We care about immigration. We care about environmental issues. We don't want our neighborhoods to be completely just messed up and dirty. That's why people would be trying to get out the hood into nice suburbs and rural areas. But I don't think that either parties can handle all those policy issues. And therefore, like the Jewish community, I think we need to basically rally around policy issues as Black Christians, or just Christians in general, whether you're white, and literally have both. We need to, or just human beings, but people who rally around policy, and then they infiltrate all the parties. You saw the gay lobby do that, right? You had the log cabin Republicans. You have gay people in the Democratic Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party. I don't think it's an issue of what party you're on. I think the problem, especially with Black Christians or Black people, is they don't agree. They haven't really codified the 10 major issues and said, look, we're going to try to take these gospel of policies, whether it's pro-life, and pro-woman, mother life, right? And say, look, we're going to try to infiltrate all parties and just be pro-lifers on every level, from the womb to the tomb, and we're not going to think in terms of Democrat and Republican. Again, that's kind of my take on parties now, is more about mobilizing people around policy. And where I differ with most conservative Christians is I actually believe, from a conservative biblical standpoint, for example, reparations. And I think Democrats are moving towards reparations. And I'm in agreement. I'm not even African American in a historical sense. But when I look at the Bible and what it says about thievery and restitution, it's very clear for me. But Republicans, my white brothers and sisters who are Republican, and I love them, they totally fundamentally disagree with that. Now, they argue a lot about, well, how does that work out? Like, how much money should we give? Yeah, feasibility. And that's a different issue. The issue is it morally biblical? When the Jews left Egypt, God told the Egyptians to restore their wealth, and they left with gold and silver and tons of money, because they were slaves and they deserved just compensation. So that makes me a policy person and not just a party person. So people like me are kind of, it's about policy, not necessarily a particular party.
Good stuff. Now, I know more people are going to want to talk. I do want to say that we're coming up on time. I'm willing to keep this open and keep it going. But for those of you that, if anyone has to hop off, I want to give you a little 30 seconds, 1 minute, to talk specifically about what are the major things you're looking at in this particular election. I love that Ray talked about, don't just think about the federal, the presidential ticket. Think about state, think about local municipalities as well when you're looking at everything. But for those of you that have to hop off right now, let's all go around in a circle, and then we can say goodbye to those who have to hop off and keep the conversation moving. But what are the things in 30 seconds? In here too. Yeah. I think Sandra's in here. In 30 seconds, what is it that you are, the main thing you're looking at when you're thinking about this upcoming election?
Okay. There goes Sandra.
Okay.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Sandra.
I just came back. My daughter had surgery yesterday, Friday. So
I
I've been over there. You can't hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I hear you.
I was saying, sorry, it was a lot of challenges over here.
That's okay. We're glad you made it.
I was over at my daughter. She had surgery on Friday. Thank God she's okay.
Oh, good.
She got to go back in 2 weeks. But as Ray was talking about policies, I'm a social worker. So policies is my thing. And if my policies align, well, we as Black people or Christians, Black Christians, have to get a little bit more involved in where we can have a say-so in our policies. And how do you do that? Is because then you got to get into the community and find out what it is that's missing in your community. He spoke about Israel, and he spoke about the stuff that's going on right now. I'm in New York. And how they treat us. But one thing I do respect about them is that they honor, or they teach their children how to respect their own culture. Their own culture. And they're guided by that. I would like for us to be united that way. I would like for us to, it's not Black against Black, but I would like for us to be like that. Now, what if there's two parties right now? Well, there was three, the Independent Party or the Liberal Party. But right now, I'm aligned with the person or the party that has much more that I'm looking for. Community housing, affordable housing. And I play with that, affordable housing, because I've also been over here where affordable housing is according to who. So that's what we also have to work on. It's not affordable to everyone. So police reform. They have to get more. It's not even about more teaching them how to deal with each other. But if you're not interacting, I remember when they used to walk the beat. And it might be dangerous, but you get to know your community. You can't send a white man into the community of Black people and expect for him to understand. You have to have a lot more community talks. So I'm guided by those things that would help my community. But overall, everyone that looks like me, or better yet, the world. But I know that the president is not in that. As much as they think that they are in power, they can't do everything. They need the Congress. They need Congress. They need everything to be aligned with the way they think and able to pass a lot of laws or write a lot of policies that will affect us in a positive way.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yes, Melissa, I know you've got an appointment.
I've got to go, and I'm actually hearing things clearly now. I heard Sandra. Thank you so much, Sandra. You know I love you, and I love when you have input. I wanted to just quickly touch on some of the things Shamata said, because what she said resonated with my heart, and that's where my heart is. Shamata talked about our children. She says they want us to get caught up in the noise, and our ancestors fought too hard to get where we are and where they got us to. And she said, what is profitable for our children? We want to leave them a legacy, and how will it affect them? The things we're choosing, how will it affect them? She said our parents, when we had friends, those friends became family. They brought them into the family and living in harmony. I'm all about the next generation. I'm all about the fruit of the womb. I never intended to have 7 children. That was the plan of the Lord. I wanted a boy and a girl. I had them. I was good. I was done. Lord said different. But quickly, that's where I would like us, Shamata, I'm in agreement. We need to come together as a people. What power we would have as a people if we could come into agreement on what is most important and what we should vote for, what we should stand for, how we should move forward. I'm all for that, okay? But I have to say, I'm with Shamata. It's all about our children. And right now, the parties, I am not about one or another, but I tend to vote with those who are. I just watched the 1916 Project. I don't know you guys have heard about this. I will send you the link. I don't know if I did. But our womb, our seed has been under attack for generations. You go back to even far back as Africa, when slavery, we come over, they want to get rid of our seed. And the parties right now, which one is standing for our seed? Which one is standing to not have our seed be killed before they are born? And so that's my stance, not only for our unborn children, but like Jack said, from the womb to the tomb, for life. And so I have to go because I have another meeting with a pastor's wife, but I have to go. But that is where my heart lies. It's important that we recognize the need to be the voice for our children, to be the voice for the next generation. We need to get clear, put aside the noise, sit together, find out from each other, why do you believe what you believe? Jack, you said about the top 10 major issues. Educate us on that. Educate our people on that. Jhael, You are so gifted. I don't think we agree on everything. I know Ray and I don't agree on everything, but I'm telling you, not that I have favorites. I do not have favorites. I can't.
Sure.
But Jhael and Ray are two of the closest people to my heart. Why? Because they agree just like, no, because I can talk to them. I can share my heart and still be loved by them. We don't always agree, but I know they love and respect me. And I love and respect them. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Let's find out, why do you believe what you believe, and how can you, given who we are as a people, given where we've come from as a people, given who our people have been. And I have to say, Jesus Christ and him crucified is at the heart of everything. So I will not, and I cannot vote with anybody that stands against, well, we won't talk about their character. Sorry. But, you know, David was a man after God's own heart, but he was a sinner. The man was a sinner, but the Lord called him a man after God's own heart because his intent was to follow hard after God. He made mistakes, big, major mistakes, but he was following hard after God. That's where I will stand. Those who are trying to the best of their ability in our fallibility to stand for what is good and righteous and pure and holy and good. Love you guys. Hope we can do this again. Please let's do this again. Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye, Tia.
Bye. Go ahead, Ray.
Oh no, I was just saying about it, Tia.
Well, share with us, like when you're thinking about this upcoming election, what are the major things you're thinking about?
You know, I tend to think bigger than myself. I think I start from the standpoint of like everything. And I'm not saying that's the right way, but that's just my inclination. And so economy is a really big one for me because, you know, I've witnessed this past 4 years. It's been brutal just watching people struggle with, you know, loss of jobs. You had the whole vaccine thing. I had friends who lost jobs because they didn't want to get vaccinated. Even that, you know, that was a very, to me, that was a very visceral experience because it wasn't just the after effects of that in terms of like people actually losing job. I have two of my closest friends that they had to pick up their whole family and relocate to another state because of that. But it was even before that. It was just even within me, just me and my wife and my mother-in-law. It's like, and other people. It wasn't everybody was dealing with it. Like this again. What I said earlier is like there are issues that, in principle, when we talk, you talk to different people from different walks of life, and you would think you're in agreement.
Right.
But then when we get into it, there's some disagreement. And just my analysis, what I was seeing, again, what I kept walking away with is like, yeah, there are games being played on us right now. Again, to the point where we're taking everyday issues that, again, just due to the nature of it, it's important. So people are going to talk about it. But then it's being framed and encouraged to be discussed in a manner that causes division, that causes separation. And I saw people struggle with that, and people are still dealing with it, the aftermath of it. So that is a big one for me in terms of, you know, how a large body of people are governed. So that was one issue for me. So economics will touch that for sure. Is a big one for me. And just, I don't know. We're really at a point where like someone said earlier, I think was it Melissa, in terms of like the answer you would get, you know what I mean? And I used to be one of those people that would give you that answer. It'd be like, well, yeah, that person makes the most sense, but they're not going to win, right?
Right.
And I've since come out of that, and I'm, you know, steadfast on the idea of like, no, we need more people to stand up and really do some soul searching and vote
your conscience.
Vote your conscience, right? And again, I'm not saying that we're always perfect on that, but what I'm saying is coming from the spirit of, go read your scripture, whatever your governing scripture is, your belief, your connection to God. Go read that. Then go pray on that. Okay. then be knowledgeable on what the earthly thing that you're dealing with, that you're trying to address, and then just try to apply those principles there, right?
Yeah.
And what I found that practice is more fruitful than listening to how they're telling you on the radio or on the TV how you should discuss things, or listen to you how you should demean another black man because he wants to vote for Trump now, because you know what I mean? It's like, I've had these conversations in my family. I've had them with my dad. I've had them with my my stepmom, who recently passed away, about, you know, there's different ways that we can emotionally abuse one another and disrespect one another. And that's one thing. It's like trying to put people in these boxes because, you know, I have this saying that I always say, is like, people show up to the party for different reasons, right? So just because a person votes for this person or that person, you don't know why they're voting for that person. So let's not go around broad brushing people and then, you know, putting them in this box that's very demeaning, and then putting them in a box to the point where you're causing division and people are not feeling welcomed, or you're questioning a person's blackness and all this other craziness. It's like, we've gotten to a point where there's so many of these schemes that are being unrolled on us and shared to us and pushed on us media wise. And we have to guard our kids. We have to guard our kids against that, because it's very easy. We have to, even when we send them into the schools, it's like you send them into the school now, you have to armor them up before they go into the school to understand, so they know when they go in, they can detect the game that's trying to be ran on them. And they can be that source and that example to other peers around them, and say, no, we don't got to just hear something, take it, and then regurgitate it as gospel. We have a mind that God has given us. We've got a heart that God has given us. Use it. Question it against your morals and your ethics that you were taught in your home, whatever you are, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't matter. We have to get back. I think we have to just get back to more of that, and getting outside of these games and narratives that are trying to be spun on us as human beings in general.
It seems like the last 12 years more so than before.
Oh, it's picking up.
Like you're choosing one part of who you are over the other in your political associations. If you're choosing to vote this way, that means you're identifying more with this part of who you are versus the other. And more so people are telling you that, not that you're making that conscious decision. They're saying, if you make this decision, you are saying that you're rejecting this part of who you are and leaning wholly into this part of who you are. And I don't remember hearing the message so strongly and so universally the way I've been hearing it in the last 12 to 16 years.
I'll just stay on that point. I think this is just my own personal take. It could be wrong, but I think I actually think it's a reflection of that mechanism that's out there that's trying to do all this tinkering, and they're actually in a mode of desperation, because I think there are more and more people who are saying, let me actually think about this logically, because, like, to your point, it's like these things are trying to be passed off. Like, okay, you vote that way, then you're less right, and that's being more pushed, I think, because, again, there's just more people just thinking outside the box. So now there's more of an act of desperation on their part that they're seeing, because I think wholeheartedly, again, everything I'm saying is like, at the heart of it is like, they don't want to see what God desired us to do, which is to live amongst each other in peace and love and harmony. And again, like I said from the beginning, you don't get any of those fruits without love and justice. You have to, that has to be coming out, especially in the world we live in, because we're living in a world, again, that's governed by so much injustice, so much corruption, so much of this and that. So those are the things that I think the planet is waking up to and saying, we don't want this anymore. We want something new. And though they may not even identify with a religious belief, at the heart of it, again, I think is they're yearning for the things that God desires for us, even though they may not even identify it as that.
Because He's written His law on every man's heart. Absolutely.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Mr. Brown, what you got for us?
Well, I don't know. I think I would, Ray, you mentioned economics, and I think that's important to me also. And I'll tell you how things were framed. I was in Texas at one time, and someone came to me and said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Southern California." He says, "How in the world do you live out there?" So what do you mean? He said, "Your politics." I said, "Well, what about our politics? He says, well, like the way you guys run government. He says, for example, our government's in the black. You guys are always in the red. I said, well, that's true. He says, you know why that is, right? He says, because we elect people to run the government for us, people we trust. But you guys put everything out to everybody to vote for. And so everyone's voting for whatever decision is going to be made. And the way the decision is made is like this. And he described this to me. He says, let's say they want to take out a loan to put in a library. So they'll put a vote out there for a bond to build a library. But then when they advertise it, they'll advertise it like this. Johnny was walking to the park and got mugged and got beat up. And poor Johnny lost his life because Johnny didn't have a library to go to. We have this bond where you can vote for the more libraries or vote for your little Johnnies to get beat up. And that's the way they do things in California. I mean, we completely reframe what we're doing and what we're saying to make it an issue that doesn't have anything to do with what the issue is. I think for me, my big issue on the propositions is on the local level, and that is everything's got to get a new bond. We have to bond everything. But we have money. We have lots of money, but it's not used correctly. And so they're always asking for more money to do the things they have money to do. And I realized that I got duped into this at one point when they put out the election to vote on casinos in California. The Indian reservations permission to put out casinos. And the advertising said, half of this money is going to go into education. So all this money is going to be coming into education. It's going to education. And this was it. It was earmarked for education. So you vote for the casinos, you're voting for education. Okay. Well, that sounded great. What they didn't bother to say that was for every penny that the casinos put into education, our government took out a penny. So the actual amount of money being spent on education did not change at all, because the millions that went into education from the casinos, the government said, oh, now we can take that money out because our education budget is fulfilled and we can spend that money elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened. And I realized money doesn't get spent like it's going to get spent. I like some things that we do in our state, like we tax gas. And when you tax gas, our roads are being paid for by our gas tax. So the more gas I use, the more I'm paying for the roads. The less I use, the less I pay for the roads. If I don't have a car, I'm not buying gas. I'm not paying that part of the road repair and upkeep. Now, I don't know what we're going to do now that electrical cars are around, because now they don't pay for any of the roads in that regard, you know? But so for me, it's very much, I don't want to give you permission to take out more loans, which are ultimately going to impact taxes, because it's the only way to get them paid back. I don't want you to give me permission to take out more loans. I want you to use what you're using wisely.
Yeah.
And you decide what's important. Don't come to me and tell me this is really important. We've got to take out a loan for this. No, if it's important, use your budget to do it and get rid of something that's not as important. But your budget is huge. Your budget is huge. There's a lot of waste in there. Use it for that, whatever. I thought it was comical in our state when we had a governor, one of the old actors, who decided, okay, the way we're doing money is wrong. So he moved to consolidate all these loans and get rid of them. And you know, they took him out of office. They removed him out of office because he said, let's use the money that we have and stop taking out all these loans. And they removed him from office. And I think that the problem is that's how individuals are moving now. And so we have a state filled with people who are upside down, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, that's important that government impacts a lot. But if we can help the individuals to get on their feet and teach them how, and government support doesn't always do that. I know that I've seen where our welfare system will pay you more if you have no man in the house.
That's crazy. I've heard that so much too. That's something I saw as a young person, and we're going to close it. I'm going to give you, Sandra, 1 minute to close it out because I know we have to say goodbye. But I want to say, you guys hear me say this all the time. I'm just against policies that perpetuate the downward spiral of codependency. That's my thing.
Thank
But
you. That's exactly.
Yeah, but over to you, Sandra. You get to close this out with the last 30 seconds.
Okay, he said about like when he talked about the welfare system. And what I would say, because I used to work for the welfare system and I studied it, I would say the least amount of, there's a pie. The least amount of money, go to welfare.
Yeah.
The most amount of money, go to warfare.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think the issue is how much money is going to welfare.
No,
I think the issue is with the way that we motivate people and support. And are we support the people on welfare? Are we supporting them to get to the point where they no longer are dependent on welfare, or are we satiating them in their subsistence?
Well, you could, and in a way they are. You could if you come on welfare. First of all, if you come on welfare, they should allow you to get an education because it should be a stepping stone. Not
absolutely agreed.
You should be allowed, but they don't want you to get that.
They just exactly that's the problem. It sounds like you have, Sandra. It sounds like you have found our next discussion. I say that we should probably make this a regular thing. Or maybe we need to make more time than 1 hour. We've gone 12 minutes over already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit up all of us back on the family chat thread that we have and see if we can't have set up another time. Maybe whenever you guys schedule permits in a month, we can do this monthly or quarterly. But we have way too much to talk about and share.
Monthly
you guys have way too much knowledge for us not to be doing this more. And I think would really bless a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's time for me to say goodbye. That is it for this. That is it for this. The ones that on here, quiet. The ones that on here, like you said, have a lot of knowledge. Yeah. Ones don't. They need to be in there. They're gonna get in. They're gonna come. We're gonna build it up. They're gonna build it up. That's it for this installment of the Jhael Hakimian Podcast. Can't wait to see you all again next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.